Great. So let's get started. Welcome to today's webinar. I'm James Fletcher from JTF Marketing. I'll be taking you through the webinar today. So any questions that you've got throughout the session, feel free to put them into the Q&A section or the chat, whatever works for you. And today we're going to cover program templates and tokens, so your secret weapons for rapid program builds. A lot of the conversation today is going to require some knowledge of Marketo and some knowledge of using programs within Marketo itself. So if you get any questions that come up about the basics, let me know as well. So to get us started, a quick agenda. So we're going to be covering an introduction to program templates and tokens. We're going to also discuss what makes a good Marketo program template. We're also going to look at the best practice structure that will help you scale your marketing operations, because that's often a challenge for most organizations using Marketo. And we're going to talk a little bit more about tokens on scalable event programs. If you're running webinar series, if you're running road shows, if you're getting back to exhibitions, how can we scale those? How do we make them easier to execute? Because they are one of the most complicated programs in Marketo. Finally, at the end, we'll have Q&A. We've got around 30 minutes. I'm your speaker. I'm James Fletcher. I'm the CEO and a Marketo Solutions Architect here at JTF Marketing. A lot of the stuff that we do for our clients covers a range of industries and different technologies, different integrations. And often our challenge is how do we make sure that we share that best practice with everybody that we speak to? So this is why we run these webinars on a regular basis. And if you haven't seen one of our webinars before, head over to our website and look under the resources. There's a ton of information there in terms of how do you better use Marketo Engage. So we are a consultancy business focused purely on Marketo. We spend day in, day out living and breathing Marketo, its integrations, its challenges, and we aim to overcome a lot of them. We work with our companies and clients across a range of use cases. So not only technical implementation and campaign support and execution, but how do we scale marketing operations? What does good look like? How do we build the right campaigns? How do we make sure that they are correct for our business? And so there's two parts here. As we start to talk about the program templates, there's one piece which is building the common scenarios, but also what should I be building, which is the deeper question. We also have training services here at JTF Marketing. So we've got our online training courses that we've built from scratch based on different user profiles. And that's really to help people feel comfortable with the technology and be confident that even if we're giving someone access, they have the right level of knowledge to get started. Finally, we also have a software piece to our business, which is plugging into Marketo, helping manage and manipulate that data to get it to do what we really want, to make sure that it's we've got a good, clean database, and also control that license cost. It can get out of hand as the database is growing, and we've got to keep a close eye on that, of course, when we're managing tight budgets. So let's start from the end result here. When we start talking about program templates, the main goal for a lot of us, how do I build more in less time and make sure that it's accurate, right? That's the big challenge. I often talk about this switch from 20 hours of building down to 4. And this is often because when we talk about event programs, they're very complex. They can get quite intricate in the detail that we want to provide. But often we're actually just turning the wheel, right? We're delivering the same stuff over and over again. So with program templates, we want to save time. We want to make it efficient. We also want to reduce the amount of error that is potential. We also want to make sure that the quality is there and consistent across all of our communications that go out to our customers and prospects. And importantly, that it doesn't require a lot of hand-holding, because often what happens in Marketo, and you guys may already find this, you get someone to build something, they might execute independently, something's wrong, no one has time to check, or you have a lengthy review process depending on the industry you work in. Some of our customers work in highly regulated industries, so therefore that QC has to be very accurate and make sure that not only the copy is signed off, but the images look good, the deliverability rate is going to be good, et cetera, all of those nuances. If you're an email marketer, you understand. And if you're a generalist marketer, maybe new to marketing automation, you may not have the depth of knowledge to understand what should I be testing and when. We do have some fantastic checklists in our resources section as well on the website, which I recommend downloading. been very popular for webinars and email sends. So if you're doing some of those, get those lists and use them as a reference point. We're also looking to scale our marketing operations, right? So I've mentioned this already. What does that actually mean? It means that we've got a very small team of professionals within our business who really understand Marketo as a whole and understand its capabilities. And we've got to scale those people. We've got to get them working on the things that really matter, not QCing emails, not building the basics, but actually thinking about what is the strategy? How do we improve the way we use this technology in order to get our results? We then talk around consistent data capture and hygiene. So one of the challenges we see in a lot of Marketo instances is dirty data. Why? Because it's coming in from every angle, from CRM integration, Zoom webinar integrations, API or LinkedIn forms, list uploads, events, you know the score. There's just lots of data being pushed into Marketo in different ways. So we've got to think about what can we do in order to improve that of the data we capture directly into Marketo, and what are the hygiene rules that we may want to run on an independent program basis or at a global scale. Finally, we've got compliance, right? So I've talked a little bit about regulation. When we get into talking about GDPR, CAN-SPAM, you know, there's dozens of rules cropping up here and there. What we've got to understand is, have we complied with those rules? Have we got it built in to the nature of what we do? And how do we make sure that we are then tracking it correctly? So what are program templates? Program templates are ultimately best practice programs that are pre-built with almost containers. They're kind of fill in the gaps, draw between the lines, however you want to describe it. They're programs that include local assets such as emails and smart lists and smart campaigns, and also may reference global assets. So if you've got your global form set up for webinar registration or event registration or feedback forms or download forms, wherever those might be, you can reference those into the program so that everybody's using those consistently. Similarly with smart lists, so again, if you've got your segmentation built and ready to use, you don't want to keep rebuilding lots and lots of smart lists. There's no point. You can keep referencing the same ones. When we talk about inbuilt processes and tagging, this can be everything from attribution capture through to hidden parameters, UTMs. Often we use in marketing. So again, capturing those and understanding where stuff comes from. It can also be escalation that can be push that straight to sales, change the lead lifecycle stage, update the revenue model, so on and so forth. Even lead scoring. The one thing often that gets missed off in a lot of campaign builds in Marketo is progression statuses. If you're not familiar with those, it's worth listening to one of our other webinars on channels and tags, where we talk about how to use those channels and tags and how do you use progression statuses to match reporting. How do you get reporting out that's very useful to you? We also develop these program templates by use case, right? So we're trying to think about what are the common campaigns that we're building, what are the things that we want to track, and how do we want to track them consistently across the board. And you'll see on the right-hand side that actually I've got a few examples, and I'll show you these in live in a second. We've got downloads, we've got blogs, we've got email sends, we've got webinars, we can even get web pages, because we're trying to track all of this content and really understand what works, really make sure that we've understood whether we've had a success using this piece of content, either as part of a marketing program or as an independent container, such as a webinar. We're also going to have these programs already structured, right? So we've already got the right structure, the build order, and then all we're expecting our users to do is clone. Simply clone that program, update the naming convention, fill in the gaps, add in the content, run a few simple tests, activate the rest, and off we go. And that's how simple it can be in order to start using those program templates. We talk about integrated reporting, not only channels and tags, but maybe we often forget to set up our email performance report and schedule that to send to the people who've requested the campaign. Or maybe even we just forget that actually we can do this locally and understand what works. Finally, the important part around program templates is documenting how they work, how to use them, and make sure that they are easy to execute. If they're complicated to use, we're going to find a lot of people don't want to use them. And again, we'll look at some examples of how simple we often try to keep them in order to get people through that process. As I say, any questions you get throughout the session, feel free to throw them into the Q&A or into the chat, and I'll pick them up as we go or at the end. So tokens. We talk about tokens a lot in marketing, and if you've been around email marketing for some time, or if you've ever used a Microsoft Word mail merge, you know exactly what a token is. These are parameters that we can pull in to personalize and enrich the content with information that's useful to our prospects and clients. In this case, I've got a really cheesy example of an event email that could go out using event tokens. You can tokenize quite a lot in Marketo. It's very easy to get carried away with tokenization. And I think one of the important things to remember is how do we make sure that we're not breaking anything, it's easy to update, and they are the right things to tokenize, because there are some elements which we shouldn't be looking at tokenizing. I'll show you again an example of that in a second. So let's talk about what to template and what not to template. I've already talked quite a lot about content, about those common programs that we're going to send. You know, events and webinars are a great example of why you should template, because there's lots of bits that go around them. Downloads are very useful because, again, the process is going to be similar. You're going to have the same data flow for people downloading content from your website. But you might also choose to use a template program for videos, for blogs, to track whether that content is actually engaging, whether you're capturing net new names. And again, when we think about this from a reporting perspective, we're just trying to keep it really simple, keep it easy to launch these new pieces of content to our prospects and clients to see whether they work. When I talk about don't templating, there's a bit of a gotcha here because there's caveats to all of this, right? So paid media, for me, I don't feel is a very sensible channel to template. And the reason, because it's different, right? You'll be tracking Google Ads in one way, you'll be tracking LinkedIn forms in a different way. Why? Because one is using maybe a GCL ID, a URL parameter, the other one is using an API integration. You're going to do two different things that based on the journeys that those people come in. You know, a good example is often in LinkedIn forms, you don't get the chance to validate the emails. So therefore, when you drop them into your database, you're going to want to check that that data is valid before you share any information. So again, think about that from a flow perspective. When it comes to social, we've got a webinar on integration with social media using our partner Octopus. Powerful tool, lots of insights that we pull back into Marketo. And how do we use that? What does it look like? Often this is behavioral information. We're just trying to track net new names in this case. Therefore, I don't recommend templating it. Lead scoring, something we talk about often in the world of marketing automation. I believe actually lead scoring should be implemented as part of your templated programs. I believe it should be driven by channels and tags, but that's my personal opinion. There's lots of other methodologies for doing it. The most common we see in Marketo is that people use tokenized programs which allow you to then adjust the lead scoring quite easily, again, using a high, medium, low. And we've got a webinar coming up in the new year about that as well. Lead nurturing, really interesting topic. You could template the program. However, you've got to be sure that what you're templating actually works. And it's maybe a methodology that you're going to work with your internal team. So this is the big question about how do we get this right? What is the right structure? How do we scale lead nurturing and what should it look like? What are the basics? And you might find that you've got some different use cases there. Lead nurturing for acquisition, lead nurturing for engagement, lead nurturing for retention. And you're going to have to build those slightly differently depending on the data set, depending on the rules. That's why I often think that it's not about templating lead nurturing, but actually, designing it out in a piece of paper before you start to build. From a data management perspective, we've talked about this as we go through, email validation, deduplication, data hygiene, gaps. For me, this is an operational program. You can't template it. Really, it should be always running. You may want to reference it from other campaigns or push people to verification before they then get opted in, for example. Again, this will help you enable that information. There's multiple ways, again, to skin a cat here. You can figure out which way works best for you or talk to one of our certified consultants to see what might fit your instance. So Let's look at some quick examples. I'm going to jump over to Marketo and I'm going to zoom in because it's always very tiny on this big screen. And I'm going to head over to my marketing activities. So when we talk about program templates, they actually exist within marketing activities. Why? Because they are pre-built with local assets and global assets, as we mentioned before. So you'll see here, I've got on my little tree here, 99 program templates. There isn't 99 of them. It's just a naming convention to make these folders go in order. So that's why it's right at the bottom, because it's 99. You'll see here, I've got a few variants, and I want to look at a couple that might be quite interesting to you guys. So let's start with download. So in here, we've got a program. It's got a very specific channel and tag, and you'll see I've got some instructions here written in for anybody using this program type. And you'll see that in my program status, I've got visited, engaged, and filled out form. So when, my success criteria is someone fills out this form. On the left-hand side, you'll see various trigger campaigns that are pre-populated, a couple of local assets, and even a requested nurture. So if I want to embed this content later on into an engagement program, I can. And again, everything is built into simple steps. So if I take a look at Visit's web page, for example, you'll see if I jump into my smart list, I'm saying the person has visited a web page. Obviously, I need to go and build the web page first for the downloads in order to reference it here. And then in my flow steps, what I'm going to start doing is adding in my interesting moment, changing my progression statuses. Now, visit to web is always a tricky topic because actually when we start thinking about how this actually works from a technology perspective, we've got to cookie people, right? So let's look at now filled out form, which is a bit more exciting. So again, same scenario. I'm going to have to fill in the gaps here. Where's the form? What is the referrer? You may even want to get very specific here. So often in our cases, we're looking at, it was a website referrer, or it might be something different, or it's an email, and trying to capture that information. From a flow step perspective, I have lots in here. So I've got changing the program status to downloaded because I've filled out the form, letting my sales team know through interesting moments, changing my progression statuses and program successes. And then I start getting into my attribution, right? My attribution, my person source, and right down here somewhere, I've got behavioral scoring based on a token as well. Plus, I am sending them the actual link to go and download it. So as you can see here, the filling in the gaps can be relatively easy. And again, we can restructure this and reorder it so that the pieces you've got to fill in are at the top. And then, as you know, in Marketo, once these are all set up, because they are trigger-based campaigns, we've just got to activate them and leave them ready to capture some content. When it comes to webinars, I'm going to talk a little bit more about tokens here than I am program structure, but just to give you an example, this one is a wee bit more complicated. We've got lots and lots of items in here, so it is much more work than just launching a download and getting it ready to be distributed. But the return from webinar events for most of it is pretty successful. Again, I've got a channel and tag set up here correctly in order to show me who's attended and who's attended on demand. Very important, because actually what we're starting to see is lots of people do join the event live, but lots more people then go and visit this asset later on. So let's talk about tokens. Tokens you'll all be familiar with from the conversation we used earlier, lead.firstname. Tokens can be local to a program. So if they're local, you'll see my dot. If they are inherited tokens, they're either at the program folder level or the folder above that, and they filter down. What we then start to see is that we've overridden tokens as well. So you'll see some of the gaps here. In this scenario, you'll see I've got a few tokens that I'm using consistently. Webinar ID, save the date, registration URL, event description, so on and so forth. Now, these are the most common themes that we use. You can get into images. You'll see down here, I've got some other inherited. You can go crazy on tokens, as you can see, we have done here historically. There is some challenges there, especially on tracking success metrics, understanding, what works and what doesn't. Again, some of the challenges here around producing an event, the idea is to try and streamline that process. I find that often tokenized events are the biggest time saver because it will help you maximize the time here. So let's just talk about scaling with Marketo templates then. So how do we get this right? So there's a few key parts. The first part is design, making sure you've thought them through thoroughly, made sure you've thought about all the angles that you need to cover, the nuances for your business, because your business is different to mine, different to his or hers or them. And therefore, you've got to think about what is the right structure for me and what are the things I've got to make sure I've checked off before I launch these things. Documentation, absolutely critical. And I would always do this before you build anything in Marketo. It will allow you to almost sequence it in a cleaner format. So I always say, draw it out before you build it out. And make sure that you've got those structures correct. You're trying to use as many trigger-based activities as you can in order not to do continual development on a program. Think about the processes. How do you make this easy? How do you make it accessible? And how do you also optimize with regular updates, right? We've got to make sure that we evolve these over time. And I do recommend taking a backup. How do we take a backup? We've just got to clone it. We've got to save it in a little file that no one else is looking at. Our names maybe conspicuously so that no one else can change something. And that will just help you keep a track of what's changing over time as well. Then QA, QC, quality assurance, quality control, whatever terminology you want to use. Again, check that they work before you distribute them to everybody, and try and limit the approvers of the campaigns to make sure that you've got consistency. And I don't know why I've got the word red right at the end, but red something. So how can we help you? Our certified experts are very well experienced with marketing automation, marketing campaigns, and importantly, Marketo. We've got a predefined set of common campaigns, as you've seen in this example, that we can use and deploy for you pretty quickly. We'll help you leapfrog the design and documentation process since we've done it all already. And again, we can update that fairly quickly for the nuances of your business. Plus, we can also give you an external view, right? That's free of charge. That's the part where we can influence maybe what you're thinking about or how you might be able to use this technology in the right way. And that's really, really important. We're always open to having conversations with you guys about how you're using it, how you can overcome the challenges. So please don't feel that you can't get in touch. Feel free to send us over some questions. So in the meantime, I'm going to ask you guys to go and throw in some questions into the Q&A if you've got any, of course. If I've covered everything, it might be a miracle. And while we do this, I've just got this up on screen. We offer a free Marketo audit, and we can focus this on any angle that you want within Marketo, whether it's data hygiene, whether it's nurturing, whether it's reporting. And this is really about helping you manage that instance correctly, help you build a roadmap of things that you can prioritize either internally or externally to maximize the platform. So feel free to have a look at this. We'll send around these slides later to get access to this as well. But otherwise, you can find it on our website. So feel free to go and fill out that form. And again, it's free of charge. It's pretty useful. Again, the idea is building out some of those actions that you can then take on maybe in the new year, especially as everybody's ready for a break.